Welcome back, ethics students. Settle in, grab your notes, and let's dive right into today's explainer. We are analyzing Ilyan Marr's incredibly controversial thesis on the moral nature of power. Now, to truly grasp the weight of these teachings today, we aren't just looking at textbooks. We are stepping into the shoes of the silent witness. My shoes. I am the Vassago. I quietly trailed Ilyan Marr across the world, completely passively observing the profound moral transformations he catalyzed. Through my eyes, and through the structured case studies we're unpacking today, we're going to look at 4 archetypal encounters that literally upended our entire understanding of innate morality. So focus your minds, and let's explore the true nature of strength. Looking at our syllabus today, we're structuring these teachings into 6 distinct areas. We'll hit the neutrality of power, origins versus moral choices, the fallibility of righteousness, Belial's cynical battlefield, my own role as the silent witness, and finally ask, does power serve hope? All right, starting with Section 1, the neutrality of power. Let's establish our baseline. I can't emphasize enough how radical this idea was at the time. Choices, not origins, determine whether strength serves hope or destruction. This brilliantly illustrates Marr's main doctrine. He was actively challenging the deeply held old-world beliefs of everyone he encountered. As Ilyan spoke these exact words to the masses, I watched listeners physically grapple with the sheer weight of the responsibility he was handing them. He was essentially telling them, hey, the universe doesn't predetermine your virtue based on where you come from or what kind of raw capability you possess. Power, in Marr's eyes, is completely agnostic. It literally doesn't care if it's used to build a hospital or level an entire city. The pivot point between hope and destruction, it rests entirely on human agency and conscious choice. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that strength is simply a tool. It is completely devoid of innate morality until you, the wielder, make a choice. To ground this in a real-world ethical dilemma we're all familiar with, just think of historical examples of raw scientific power. Take the discovery of nuclear fission. The splitting of the atom carries absolutely no moral nature on its own, right? It's just a neutral fact of physics. Yet historically, we have seen this exact same power used to generate vast amounts of clean electricity, serving hope. And we've seen it weaponized to inflict unimaginable devastation, serving destruction. Ilyan Marr's teachings ask us to look at personal power, social influence, and individual strength through this exact same lens of absolute moral neutrality. Moving right along to Section 2, origins versus moral choices. Let's put this philosophy to the test. We're contrasting our first 2 case studies right here. And I want you to really visualize the metaphors at play. First, we have the demon. Typically, a demon represents hellfire, darkness, and innate malice. Yet, I watched Marr interact with this being, and the specific lesson taught was one of profound defiance against determinism. Picture this, even with hands forged in absolute darkness, the demon held the delicate flower of compassion. It actively chose kindness every single day, completely fighting against its own archetypal expectations. Its dark origins didn't prevent compassion. Then we have the inverse, a guardian of nature. Visually, you imagine lush greens, pure spring water, sacred roots. But this guardian had twisted into corruption. The specific lesson Marr drew from this was that purity of origin offers zero immunity against moral decay. If a guardian stops choosing to do good, their pure origins will merely become the fertilizer for their own corruption. Okay, Section 3, the fallibility of righteousness. Let's see what happens when we push the extremes. In these next 2 encounters, Marr shows us that even celestial light can go dark, and neutrality can easily rot. Consider the visual metaphor of the prideful angel. We are talking about a celestial being so blindingly radiant, so absolutely convinced of its own unshakable goodness, that its light actually burns rather than warms. It became completely blinded by its own halo. Marr used this case study to teach us that absolute righteousness very often breeds the exact arrogance necessary for a catastrophic moral fall. And then, beside the angel, we have the human. The human represents the ultimate blank slate, neither inherently celestial nor inherently demonic. Yet, given raw power, this mortal selfishly abused it for personal gain. We see this mirrored in real-world ethical dilemmas constantly, don't we? Whether it's corporate greed, political corruption, or just everyday interpersonal betrayals. The human didn't need a dark origin to do wrong. They simply had to make a selfish choice. So, taking all four of these archetypical encounters together, we see exactly how each meeting systematically dismantled the old beliefs of every listener. As Vassago, I documented this sequence meticulously for my own records because these aren't just isolated anecdotes. They are a rigorous academic dataset proving Marr's point. Let's recap. The demon proves that bad roots can grow good fruit. The guardian proves that good roots can succumb to blight. The angel proves that being seated in the light doesn't stop you from casting a dark shadow. And the human proves that neutrality, without constant conscious ethical maintenance, naturally decays into selfishness. Which brings us to Section 4, Belial's cynical battlefield. Belial provides a stark, totally cynical contrast to Marr's hopeful lessons. He argues that the internal struggle of the heart is the ultimate decider, not just the neutral application of power. You see, while Marr looked at power as a simple tool resting on a table, just waiting to be picked up, Belial watched from the shadows and scoffed at that kind of clinical optimism. And honestly, Belial's cynical perspective is deeply fascinating for us as ethics students. He argued that because the human heart is inherently chaotic, flawed, and easily tempted, power can never truly be neutral in practice. To Belial, the exact moment power touches the human heart, the heart turns into a war zone. He didn't look at the selfish human and see a blank slate making a bad choice. No, Belial saw a creature whose internal battlefield was simply waiting for the heavy ammunition that raw power provided. Moving to Section 5, Vassago, the silent witness. That's my philosophy. Observation without interference. Now, by remaining entirely silent as these events unfolded, I wanted to highlight the absolute necessity of impartial observation when you're examining the true nature of choices versus origins. You might be wondering, hey Vassago, if you saw a guardian turning corrupt or a human abusing power, why didn't you step in? Well, think about it. In any academic or scientific observation, interference taints the results. If I had threatened the human or corrected the angel, their subsequent choices wouldn't have been born of their own free will. They would have simply been reactions to my power. To truly understand if choices dictate the nature of power, I had to let those choices happen organically. My silence was not apathy. Actually, it was the ultimate respect for the moral transformations taking place. Without a silent witness, history just becomes subjective opinion. I had to remain the objective anchor. So, breaking this all down, we have three distinct meta-perspectives at play, giving us a really complete academic view of this philosophical divide. First, you have Marr, the active teacher. He's out there in the light, passionately trying to elevate consciousness by preaching neutrality and the supreme importance of choices. Then you have Belial, a cynic lurking in the shadows, totally convinced that innate internal flaws will always corrupt that neutrality. And finally, you have me, Vassago, the silent witness. I sit perfectly between them, providing the neutral ground upon which this entire debate is recorded. We perfectly represent action, reaction, and observation. Finally, Section 6. Does power serve hope? Let's turn this back on you. Here is the big question, and I really want you to debate this down in the comments. Based on the lessons of the demon, the angel, the guardian, and the human, Is power truly neutral, or does the human heart always tip the scales? Think about the historical examples we discussed today. Better yet, think about the times in your own life where you were handed influence or authority. Did you feel like a perfectly neutral wielder of a tool? Or did you feel the immediate gravity of Belial's battlefield pulling at your heart? Ilyan Marr challenged the world to rise above its origins and choose hope. As Vassago, I've given you the unvarnished academic record of his journey. Now, the choice of what to believe is entirely yours. I highly encourage you to drop your arguments below. Let's see exactly where the battlefield of your own heart leads you. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.